Wine. It's simply crushed and fermented grapes. The variations in the stories are what make it so fascinating.
As an AVA, I started just learning that it's such a diverse AVA. There's so many microclimates and terroir. I just felt like it was a good choice for Cabernet Sauvignon.
The climate, the soil, the amount of sun.
We do manage our canopies differently on the morning side of the vine versus the afternoon side of the vine, because in the afternoon it's so much warmer. We leave more leaves for more shading, whereas in the morning side of the vine we get more exposure because they're not exposed. That way they get the light without the intense heat.
There are so many varieties of grapes, and then different clones and different rootstocks. And perhaps even more important than any of this is the story of the winery, the winemaker, and the people who love these wines, their philosophies, and the different ways that they bring their reverence to the grape.
Unless you own land. So at that point he's like, well, that's it. Because they were kind of like, should we build a winery? Should we buy land? Like, we can only do one or the other. So they bought 40 acres on sort of
The estate vineyards for Kitski.
They're all here
Okay.
On this property for Kitski, and then we have a separate vineyard that's out. It's not in Candy Mountain AVA or Red Mountain. It's right across from the Red Mountain AVA
Okay.
in like lower Yakima Valley.
Yeah, I grew up on a small farm about 20 miles from here, and met my wife in college, and her dad had this very successful large farm here. I thought I would be a banker or work for some agriculture company. I majored in ag econ.
Our goal at Crush Grape Chronicles is to explore and chronicle the grape, its many stories, and its journey from dirt to glass. So, we've been following a lot of Biodynamic vineyards, and I know that you guys have converted and got your certification and everything. So that's kind of what attracted us to you here in Red Mountain. Okay. So we haven't visited any of the other wineries in the area, so Red Mountain is new to us. We've been a lot of the rest of Yakima Valley, but not to Red Mountain. So, but seeing that you were Biodynamic, and then after reading stuff, I was like, oh, I really wanted to talk with you. So let's start off talking about your family and what brought them here to Red Mountain.
So my dad's actually from Tri-Cities. The Hedges family actually landed in Washington State in 1888, and they were wheat farmers up in Waterville area. And then apple farmers in Wenatchee, and then my grandpa ended up getting a job at Hanford, so my dad grew up in this area. My mom's from Champaign.
Right.
They met in Mexico at a party. They were both, so she was studying language and he was studying tequila production. He was getting his master's in international business and thought that would be a fun thing to write about. So they met at a party and got engaged like 3 months later and got married a year later, and now it's been like 43 years or something like that. So we traveled the world. I mean, my dad was in international produce sales. He worked for Dole, Castle & Cook, and McCain up in Canada. So we went from South America to Northeast Canada, and we ended up back in Seattle, and he was jobless and sort of was, what can I do? And through some of his produce contacts, they were kind of, West Coast wines at that point were getting pretty popular. And so he's like, well, maybe this could be a thing. Maybe I could start brokering wine. And my mom being French, had the sort of wine in her blood, I guess. So they started brokering wines. And at that point it was, bulk wine from here to there, or shipments direct from like Gallo to Singapore, and just all over the world. And so that went on for a few years, and then he started getting more specific requests for wines from especially Washington State, and some of them we couldn't fill via wineries, so they just sort of created their own blends through bulk containers here and there. And I think one of them they blended at Washington Hills and shipped over. And so our first actual sale of wine that said Hedges on it was all to the government of Sweden. Oh. And that was about 5,000 cases worth of wine, which is quite a lot when you're starting out. And that was so successful and so popular that, and back then the prices of Washington wine were dirt cheap. So compared to European wines, it was like, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, then the second year we almost doubled our volume the second year. And then, we were like, well, why don't we try selling this in the States? And so we kind of, the Hedges brand was born. And so at that point we were still buying from bulk products. And then eventually we started buying grapes. And my parents went to a show, Vin Expo in Bordeaux, and everyone kept asking where my dad's vineyard was. He goes, and he's like, why do they keep asking me about the vineyards? And my mom's like, well, because in France you're nothing unless you own land. So at that point he's like, well, that's it. Because they were kind of like, should we build a winery? Should we buy land? Like, we can only do one or the other. So they bought 40 acres on sort of a tip from my dad's buddy out here. So he went to a high school reunion in '89, and the guy said, well, you got to buy on Red Mountain. Like, this place is going to blow up. It's going to be the best fruit in the state. And so they bought this first 40 acres for like $1,200 an acre.
Wow.
With water. We got the last private water right ever granted for this area. And we planted grapes, and so this area kind of sat empty until 93, 94, and kind of got the bare bones of the winery built at that point so we could actually produce wine here. And so that's how we got here.
Excellent.